He went out at night, and no one ever saw him again. But that's not the strangest part. Sometimes, people still say they can hear his footsteps, slow, steady, unhurried, as if he is still walking down that same street, night after night. This happened in a small medieval town, a quiet place, hidden between forests and narrow roads, a place where time seemed to move slowly, especially after sunset. During the day, the town felt alive. People filled the streets. Voices echoed between the stone walls. Merchants called out. Children ran across the uneven ground. Doors opened and closed, and life felt simple and familiar. But when evening came, everything began to change. Not all at once, but slowly, very slowly. One by one, windows were zakrut. Wooden shutters closed with a dull sound. Candles were lit, then carefully placed deeper inside the rooms, away from the windows. Doors were locked, heavy wooden doors, with iron locks, secured from the inside. People spoke more quietly, as if they did not want their voices to carry too far into the night. And then, eventually, the streets became empty, completely empty. No footsteps, no voices, no movement, only silence. Thick, heavy, almost something you could feel. Imagine a narrow stone street, houses standing so close together that the sky above looks like a thin line. Even during the day, light struggles to reach the ground, and at night, that little bit of light disappears completely. The moon hangs above, but its glow is weak, soft, barely touching the cold stone walls. Long shadows stretch across the ground, slowly shifting, as if they are alive. The air becomes colder, stiller, and the wind moves quietly between the houses, slipping through small gaps, whispering along the walls. And sometimes, very rarely, it feels as if the wind is not moving alone, as if something else is passing through the street, just out of sight. The people of this town knew one simple rule, a rule that everyone followed, without question. Do not go outside at night, especially after midnight, because that was the time when the streets were no longer truly empty. They only looked empty, and that was enough for most people, but not for everyone. That night, one man could not sleep. He lay in his small room, wrapped in a rough blanket, staring into the dim light of a single candle. The flame moved gently, casting soft shadows that slid slowly across the walls. Everything was quiet, too quiet. He turned slightly, listening. At first, there was nothing, only the faint sound of the candle and the slow rhythm of his own breathing. But then, very softly, he heard it, a sound, barely noticeable, a step, then another, footsteps, far away at first, somewhere down the street, slow, even, deliberate. He stayed still, listening more carefully now. The sound continued, not rushing, not stopping, just walking, as if someone had nowhere to be. And all the time in the world, he held his breath, waiting. The footsteps faded slightly, as if moving further away, and for a moment, everything was silent again. He almost relaxed, almost convinced himself that it was nothing, just the wind, just the old wood, settling in the night. But then, the sound returned, closer this time, clearer, right outside, Slow, steady, one step, then another. Passing along the street, just beyond his door, he sat up slowly. The air in the room felt different now, heavier, colder, and the silence no longer felt empty. It felt as if something was there, waiting. He turned his gaze toward the door, watching it, as if expecting it to move, but it remained still. No knock, no voice, only those footsteps, moving, pausing, then moving again. He knew the rule. Everyone knew it. Never open the door at night, especially not after midnight. And yet, there was something about that sound, something steady, something unnatural in how calm it was, that made it impossible to ignore. He slowly moved his feet to the floor. The wood creaked quietly beneath him, and for a brief moment, the footsteps outside stopped completely, as if whatever was out there had heard him too. He froze, not moving, not breathing, listening. Seconds passed, slowly. Then, just as quietly as before, the footsteps returned, continuing down the street, calm, unbothered, as if nothing had happened. He stood up, very slowly, each movement careful, measured, his eyes fixed on the door, his hand lifting slightly, reaching toward the handle, and then stopping just before touching it, as if somewhere deep inside he already understood that once the door opened, something would change, and it would not change back. He remained still, standing in the quiet of the room, his hand still suspended in the air, just a small distance away from the door. The candle behind him flickered softly, its light growing weaker, then stronger again, as if even the flame could not decide whether to stay or fade. The shadows on the walls shifted slowly, stretching, moving, then settling again. And in that silence, he could feel something. Not a sound, not a movement, but a presence. Something just beyond the door, waiting. He lowered his hand slightly, hesitating. Perhaps it was nothing, just the night, just his imagination, just the way the mind sometimes fills the silence. But then, the footsteps returned again, closer now, closer than before. Not at the end of the street, not somewhere far away, but right there, just beyond the wood of the door. One step, then another, slow, even, deliberate. He could almost feel the rhythm of them, as if each step echoed inside the room. His breath became quieter, almost invisible. He leaned slightly forward, listening, trying to understand, but the sound gave nothing away. No hurry, no hesitation, just movement, steady, endless. And then, silence, sudden, complete. So complete that it felt unnatural, as if the world itself had paused. He waited, 1 second, then another. Nothing. The air grew colder. He could feel it now, against his skin, through the thin fabric of his clothes. A quiet chill, not sharp, but constant. Slowly, very slowly, he placed his hand on the handle. The wood felt cold, colder than it should have been. He tightened his grip, just slightly, and for a brief moment, everything felt still again. Then, with a soft sound, he opened the door. The darkness outside did not move. It did not react. It simply remained. Thick, deep, endless. The warm light from the candle behind him spilled gently onto the ground outside, but it did not travel far. Only a small patch of light, surrounded by shadow. The street beyond was empty. No figure, no movement. Only the pale glow of the moon, resting faintly on the stones, and the fog, thin at first, barely visible, but slowly, it moved, sliding along the ground, rising gently, wrapping around the edges of the street. He stepped outside, one careful step, then another. The air felt different here, heavier, thicker, the kind of air that does not move easily. He looked to one side, nothing. To the other, still nothing. Just empty space, empty houses, empty windows, watching, always watching. He took another step forward. The sound of his own movement seemed louder now, too loud, as if it did not belong. And then, for a brief moment, he felt it again. That same presence, not in front of him, not behind him, but somewhere, just out of reach, just beyond where his eyes could see. The fog shifted slightly, as if something had passed through it. But when he focused, there was nothing, only silence. Deep, endless. He stood there, in the middle of the street, surrounded by darkness, and for a moment, it felt as if the town itself was no longer empty, but filled with something unseen, something that did not need to be seen, only felt. He did not move, standing there, in the middle of the empty street, the fog slowly drifting around him, curling softly near his feet, then rising, then fading again. It was quiet, too, quiet. Not the kind of silence he knew, not the gentle quiet of night. This silence felt different. It felt watchful, as if the darkness itself was aware of him. He turned his head slightly, listening, but there were no footsteps now, no movement, no sound at all. Only the faint whisper of the wind, moving somewhere far away. And yet, the feeling remained that he was not alone. He took a slow breath. The cold air filled his lungs, heavy, still, and for a moment, he thought maybe he should go back inside, close the door, lock it again, forget what he heard, forget what he felt, return to the warmth, to the candlelight, to something familiar. But his feet did not move, as if something was holding him there, not with force, not with pressure, but with something quieter, something that simply did not allow him to turn away. He took another step forward. The stone beneath his foot was cold, slightly damp. The fog thickened for a moment, rising just enough to blur the edges of the street. The houses seemed further away now, less defined, their shapes softened, as if they were no longer solid, only outlines, watching, waiting. He looked down the street again, long, empty, disappearing into the mist. And then, very faintly, he heard it. A step, so quiet that it almost did not exist. Then another, far ahead this time, somewhere deep within the fog, slow, steady, the same rhythm, the same sound as before. He did not call out. He did not move faster. He only listened as the sound continued. One step, then another, never rushing, never stopping, as if whoever made those footsteps did not need to hurry, as if they had always been there and always would be. The sound faded, then returned again, closer, then further away, as if distance no longer mattered. He felt it again, that quiet presence, not tied to any direction, not coming from any one place, but surrounding him, softly, completely. He turned slowly, looking behind him now. The door to his house was still there, slightly open, a thin line of warm light spilling gently onto the ground, so close, only a few steps away, and yet it felt distant, farther than it should have been, as if something had stretched the space between. He watched the doorway for a moment, the quiet glow, steady, calm, inviting him back. But the air between him and that light felt heavier now, thicker, as if returning was no longer simple. The footsteps echoed again, this time behind him, very close. So close that for a moment he was certain someone stood just out of sight, just beyond his shoulder. He did not turn immediately. Something inside him told him not to. Instead, he stood still, listening, feeling, waiting. The sound stopped completely, and in that moment, everything felt suspended, as if time itself had slowed, as if the night was holding its breath. And then, nothing, only silence again, deep, endless, unchanging. And yet, the feeling remained that something was still there. He stood there for a long moment, not moving, not turning, simply listening to the quiet that had settled around him. A quiet that no longer felt empty, but instead felt full, almost layered, as if beneath that silence, something else continued to exist. Something just beyond perception. Something that did not need sound to be present. The street stretched out before him, disappearing slowly into the thickening fog. And for a brief moment, it felt as though the town itself had shifted, as though the familiar paths and houses had lost their meaning, becoming only shapes in the darkness, outlines without certainty, forms that could no longer be trusted. He took a slow breath and finally moved, just a small step at first, careful and deliberate, as if testing whether the ground beneath him was still real, still the same as before. But even that simple movement felt different now, heavier somehow, as though the air itself resisted him, pressing gently against him with an invisible weight. He began to walk, not quickly, not with purpose, but slowly, almost unconsciously, drawn forward along the narrow street as the fog curled around his legs and drifted upward, soft and quiet, swallowing the edges of everything it touched. With each step, the town seemed to fall further away, not in distance, but in feeling, as if the place he had known only moments ago no longer existed in quite the same way, as if he had stepped into something else entirely, something that looked the same but was not. The houses on either side stood still and silent, their dark windows reflecting nothing, giving no sign of life, no hint of anyone watching. And yet the sense of being observed had not left him. It remained constant, subtle, but unmistakable, like a quiet awareness pressing gently against his thoughts. He paused again. The fog shifted slightly ahead of him, just enough to reveal a little more of the street, just enough to create the impression of depth, of space continuing forward. And for a moment, he thought he saw something there. Not clearly, not in detail, but a shape. Something standing or perhaps moving very slowly. So slowly that it almost seemed still. He focused his gaze, trying to understand, trying to bring the shape into clarity. But as he did, it faded, dissolving back into the fog as if it had never been there at all. Only the empty street remained, only the silence. And yet the feeling did not change. He continued walking. Each step carried him further into the mist, further into that quiet, until even the faint light from his house behind him was no longer visible, until there was nothing left but the dim glow of the moon above and the endless gray of the fog surrounding him. Time seemed to lose its meaning here. Moments stretched, slowed, blended together, until it became impossible to tell how long he had been walking, whether it had been minutes or something longer, something that could not be measured in the usual way. The sound of footsteps returned again, but this time it was different. Not ahead of him, not behind him, but beside him, perfectly aligned with his own. Step, step, at the exact same pace, as if someone was walking next to him, just out of sight, matching every movement, every shift of weight, every breath. He did not look. He did not dare. Instead, he continued forward, his own steps now quieter, almost blending with the other sound, until it became difficult to tell which was his and which was not. The rhythm continued, calm and steady, neither threatening nor comforting, simply present, as though it had always been there, as though it had only now become noticeable. After a while, even that distinction began to fade. The footsteps no longer felt separate. They became part of the silence, part of the night, part of everything around him. And slowly, very slowly, even the tension he had felt before began to soften, dissolving into something quieter, something more distant, until the need to understand what was happening no longer seemed important. The fog moved gently, endlessly, shifting and reshaping the space around him, and the street, if it was still a street, continued forward without clear direction, without edges, without boundaries. Somewhere behind him, far away now, the town remained. Or perhaps it did not. Perhaps it had already faded, just as the sounds had faded, just as the shapes had faded, leaving only this quiet, this soft, endless night. And in that night, there was no urgency, no questions, no need to turn back. Only movement, only stillness within movement. Only the slow rhythm of steps that no longer needed a source. Gradually, even those steps seemed to disappear. Not suddenly, not completely, but gently, as if they were being absorbed into the quiet, becoming part of it, no longer separate, no longer noticeable. The air felt softer now, lighter. The cold that had once been sharp had turned into something calm, something almost comforting. The fog thinned slightly, just enough to reveal the faint outline of rooftops again, distant and quiet beneath the pale moonlight. The town, or something like it, seemed to return, but without the weight it once had, without the sense of fear or uncertainty, only as a distant memory of form and space. And the night itself remained, still, calm, unchanging, as if nothing had happened, as if nothing ever needed to happen. And if someone were to stand there now, in that same place, they would see only a quiet street, a soft light, a gentle movement of air between the houses. They would hear nothing, feel nothing unusual, and they would think that the night was empty. But perhaps it never was. If you are still awake, just let that thought drift away, like the fog, slowly, quietly, until there is nothing left to hold on to, nothing left to follow. Only the calm of the night and the quiet rhythm of your own breathing, steady, soft, and fading gently into sleep.